As we know, WhatsApp messages sent by senior UK government figures during the pandemic have made for some revealing reading. In the past week, the Scottish Government has stood accused of failing to share similar data. In that light, the Deputy First Minister, Shona Robison, today told MSPs that over 14,000 messages will now be handed to the UK inquiry.
The initial requests received from the UK inquiry focused on decision-making. As we have stated previously, it is not the culture within the Scottish Government to routinely use systems such as WhatsApp for decision-making. The Scottish Government received the Section 21 notice yesterday, and I can confirm that work is well underway to fully comply in accordance with the timetable set by the UK inquiry. This will mean that all requested messages held will be shared in full and unredacted by the 6th of November. In addition to the hundreds of messages already handed over to the UK inquiry, this notice will allow us to share over 14,000, mainly WhatsApp, messages from various groups and individuals over the period of the pandemic. I can confirm that messages from ministers and former ministers are included.
The stench of secrecy from this government is overpowering. So while today the Deputy First Minister has said the SNP government will now provide 14,000 WhatsApp messages, almost a year after they were originally asked for, does that figure include all messages from Nicola Sturgeon, from Jason Leach and any others who had deleted messages? If so, how were they recovered? If not, how does the Deputy First Minister defend this cover-up?
It's not correct to say that it's been a year since that request was made. I said in my statement very clearly that I cannot say who those messages are from and what the content is because I'm not allowed to. I don't see them.
Messages from those closest to the decision-making have been destroyed on an industrial scale. A public inquiry was talked about in May 2020. Why did ministers not retain evidence from then?
And we have already provided 19,000 documents about decision-making and 14,000 WhatsApp, at least 14,000 WhatsApp messages will be provided by the 6th of November.
We reflected on today's announcement from the Scottish Government with Rachel Amery, who's a political correspondent for the Scotsman. So what did you make of Shona Robison's statement today?
Well, I think the big thing we now know is that there are 14,000 WhatsApp messages that are going to be sent over to the UK inquiry now for someone to sift through. But often Shona Robison in the statement said, let me be clear on this, let me be clear this up for you. And I feel like there's a lot of things we're still not very clear on. And I think that was seen with the opposition politicians asking these questions, asking very direct questions, what's been deleted, how many messages have been deleted, how many messages are from each individual politician are being sent across, and those questions weren't answered in the statement today. So I think while she tried to make things clearer, I think there's still a lot of things that were still up in the air and we're still not too sure of here.
And do you think the Scottish Government is handing over the WhatsApp messages under duress?
Well, previously Nicola Sturgeon and Humza Yousaf, others in the government as well, have said, we're going to cooperate fully with the inquiry. Anything that's asked of us, we're going to hand it over, saying that there will be lots of accountability and transparency here. But this suggests, there's all these questions of has this not actually happened? So it seems to be a bit of a mismatch here with what was previously said in their commitments to the inquiry and what's now actually happening here. And I think this is another sort of problem with the transparency that perhaps they're having. Earlier on today, for example, I spoke to Anna Sarwar, the Scottish Labour leader, and he was saying, this is again showing a government that doesn't have any transparency or accountability. So that's one of the questions that's going to have to be answered now.
I mean, the Scottish Government say that they didn't use WhatsApp for decision making. So I wonder if we're actually going to learn anything from this. I mean, the UK government WhatsApps were quite explosive, weren't they? But do you think it's going to have the same kind of effect?
Well, I think after seeing some of the WhatsApps that came out of the UK inquiry today, people are going to be thinking, is there something similar going to happen in the Scottish inquiry? So I think regardless of what's going to be in them, the members of the public are going to be very interested in what these messages say, regardless of what the content is, I think. So I think that's one of the really important things here to say. But I think as well, it's up to the inquiry, really, what's counted as relevant as opposed to what the Scottish Government thinks is relevant here. It's really up to those inside the inquiry to decide whether the material is relevant or not.
Yeah, and do you think the Scottish Government has mishandled this?
Well, this has now been almost a week since we realised that this was an emerging story, and there's been multiple media stories, multiple newspaper reports, particularly over the weekend, of certain ministers who had these messages deleted, some who had auto-delete functions on apparently as well, what the government policy was, and these stories have been allowed to run and run and run. So I feel like perhaps the government, if they'd come out a bit sooner and just said this is what the policy was, this is what happened, perhaps these stories wouldn't have grown arms and legs over the weekend.
It wouldn't have kind of run away with them. A lot of attention this week has been on Nicola Sturgeon, the former First Minister, and there was a report in the Sunday Mail that she had manually deleted WhatsApp messages. She was in Holyrood today and spoke to the media.
I am cooperating fully and constructively with the inquiry. I am committed to full transparency. I have just submitted my third written statement to the UK inquiry that runs to some 200 pages. I've been asked some further questions by the inquiry, which I'm in the process of answering right now. As the Deputy First Minister has just said in the Chamber, the requests and the responses at this stage are confidential until the inquiry decides otherwise. So I cannot and will not go into the detail of those responses right now. That would be to breach the reputation.
Have you deleted WhatsApp messages?
Any messages I had, I handled and dealt with in line with the policies set out by the Deputy First Minister.
Does that mean you deleted some?
Look, can you let me finish? I will be setting out, I have already set out and will continue to set out to the inquiry how I operated, how I worked during the COVID pandemic, what I hold, what I don't hold, and the reasons for that.
Well, we still don't know if she actually did delete any messages, do we?
Well, I think that's what you've seen there from the clip. She wasn't able to directly answer that question. And I feel like if she hadn't deleted these messages, if there wasn't anything amiss here, then surely she would just say that. And the fact that she hasn't is now going to be asking more questions. So it's going to be interesting to see what comes off the back of it when it comes specifically to Nicola Sturgeon and her messages.
And so how damaging would it be if she has them? Because I think they're all saying they were operating under government rules, weren't they?
Yes, I think it's a sort of bigger question for how the government worked during the pandemic there. But I think this is one of these things where a lot of people just want to see what was in these messages. So there might never been anything particularly bad in these messages, but if they're not there, if they don't exist, that's something that we're now never going to know. So that's, I think, one of the big questions now. And especially for the COVID-19 bereaved families, for example, they're particularly keen to make sure they get the detail of what happened in these messages.